Δεν περιγράφεται, παιδιά. Σε κανένα. Με τύχη. Δεν περιγράφεται, παιδιά.
This is Babis Anagnostopoulos, just hours after his wife and dog were brutally murdered in front of his infant daughter. He had a perfect life. A wealthy helicopter pilot with a hardworking, loyal wife, a 3-story home, and a beautiful baby girl. In an instant, it was gone. And it would take law enforcement weeks to uncover the killer in a move that would shock not only the grieving husband, but the world. This is the story of Caroline Crouch, a mother and student whose life was snatched from her far, far too soon. This is the call that dispatch received in the early morning hours of May 11th, 2021. Lying on the floor of the bedroom with his hands and feet tied, Babis had managed to dial for help with his nose and choke out the address where he was tied up. Police reported to the 3-story condo in the outer suburbs of Athens to find a distressing scene. Even for seasoned investigators, it was hard to choke down. Hanging from the railing of a staircase was the couple's dog, a sweet, protective pup named Roxy. She had a noose tied around her neck and was thrown over the edge. Immediately, it became clear to responders that whoever had committed the crime showed no mercy while doing so. As they made their way upstairs, that was confirmed. Babis was lying on the ground beside the bed, tied by his feet with binds. A cloth that had been used to gag him was hanging around his neck, and he had fortunately managed to get one of his hands out of the binds as well. As police untied him and asked what had happened, he told them a horrific story. Both he and 19-year-old Caroline had been startled awake soon after midnight. 3 robbers with foreign accents demanded to know where any valuables in the house were. When one pointed a gun at Lydia, their 11-month-old daughter, she began to cry, and Caroline fought back. With her black belt in kickboxing, she was able to divert the robbers away from her child. But soon, she was overcome. Babis pleaded with the attackers and told them that they had 10,000 euros in a Monopoly box in the living room. As soon as they got this information, they tied him up and left him on the floor. What happened to Caroline could only be pieced together by detectives on the scene. She was discovered lying in bed, her skin cold to the touch. She had been suffocated, smothered by a pillow from the couple's bed.
Όταν συνειδητοποίησες ότι η γυναίκα σου δεν βρίσκεται σε ζωή.
Όταν μέλησαν οι αστυνομοί. Όταν ήρθαν οι αστυνόμοι μέσα και μέλησαν και έβγαλαν από το κεφάλι μου τα δεσμά.
Και η κορούλα?
Η κορούλα μου ευτυχώς δεν έχει χτυπήσει, πήγε στο νοσοκομείο προληπτικά και ευτυχώς είναι καλά.
Beside Caroline's body was her daughter, who was sobbing and desperate to be held. It was a heartbreaking scene, made even more so by Babis, who took his daughter in his arms as he mourned the loss of his wife. Upon hearing the news, the community began to mourn with him. Caroline was born to a British father and a Filipino mother. Largely raised on the lush island of Alonissus, her personality matched the beauty of the land around her. From a young age, she took to scuba diving and swimming, kickboxing, and acting. She was constantly surrounded by a positive, encouraging group of friends, and her teen years were marked by making fun memories in the Mediterranean. When she was 15, she attended a candlelight parade on the island over the holiday season. There, she met Babis. At the time, Babis was 28, nearly double her age. A helicopter pilot with a love of bikes, adventuring, and simple pleasures, Caroline was immediately taken by him. And everyone around her was too. Babis was on the island because his mother was actually a teacher at Caroline's school, where very few students attended. In total, the island boasts a population of 3,000, meaning that this really is a case of everyone knowing everyone. Despite the age gap, Caroline's parents reportedly approved of the relationship. After 17 months of dating, when Caroline was 17 years old, Babis proposed. Then, 3 days after she turned 18, the two flew to Portugal to tie the knot. It seemed like all of Caroline's dreams had come true. The two moved into their 3-story home in Athens, and she began attending university for statistics. By all outside accounts, their relationship was flourishing. Soon after, however, things took a heartbreaking twist. Caroline's first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. Devastated by the loss, the two began to attend therapy sessions together. Fortunately, the next pregnancy resulted in the birth of Lydia, who became the center of Caroline's world. She longed to give her daughter a safe, happy, wonderful childhood like the one she had had. She and Babis had just bought a plot of land where they were planning on building their dream house, the house where she wanted to watch her daughter grow up. But that was snatched from her that early morning of May 11th, just a few weeks shy of her 20th birthday. From the get-go, the police knew they were facing a challenging case. While the family had a surveillance camera, it had been knocked down, and the memory card had been taken by Caroline's murderer. Beside the camera was a broken window where law enforcement suspected the burglars had entered. Caroline's best friend and neighbor Lila had reported that she had heard both the baby and Roxy crying in the middle of the night.
Στις 4:20 ξύπνησα, πετάχτηκα από ένα θόρυβο που άκουσα και αυτός ο θόρυβος ήταν ένα κλάμα και έκλαιγε η Roxy.
Babis was eager to guide police toward finding the killers. Through tears, he gave police and the media his recounting of events as the entire country watched on.
Δεν περιγράφεται, παιδιά, σε κανέναν με τύχη. Δεν περιγράφεται, παιδιά.
Ήταν τόσο ότι αληθές δηλώσεις. Τι ζητάτε τώρα, τι ζητάτε.
Να μην γίνει σε κανέναν άλλον ποτέ ξανά, τίποτα άλλο.
According to Babis, the intruders seemed to either be from Georgia or Albania due to their accents. He gave thorough descriptions to police and helped them go through lineups, and it seemed to pay off. The day of Caroline's funeral, law enforcement got their first lead. A Georgian man was discovered trying to flee across the Greek border into Turkey at Evros. When he was apprehended, it was discovered that his criminal history included burglary, and the timing of his escape set off law enforcement's radar. The man, who was 43, was immediately taken into custody to be questioned and have his DNA samples run. However, after days of questioning, detectives couldn't find a single link between him and the murder of Caroline Crouch. That was incredibly unfortunate for police, because the media was eating the story up, and Caroline's mourning friends and family were desperate for answers. Babis routinely posted photos of him and Caroline in the aftermath of her death, wishing for the happier times they had. As the days passed, it seemed as though her killers were just getting further and further from justice. At the crime scene, there was no evidence to be found. Law enforcement searched under Caroline's fingernails for DNA, but the results came back inconclusive. Around the house, they were unable to find anyone else's DNA. 37 days after Caroline's murder, her parents brought her to Alanisos to have a service where she had lived for the majority of her life. In the midst of the memorial, a helicopter arrived on the island, and police came rushing to meet with Babis. They told him that he had to come with them urgently. They had finally gotten a lead in the case, and they needed him to positively identify the suspect. Babis hugged Caroline's mother and hurried with police back to the helicopter, telling her that they may have finally found the killer. And they had. What Babis didn't know is that the suspect police had was him. Through their intensive investigation, several discrepancies came up with Babis's timeline, and concerns arose about his and Caroline's seemingly perfect relationship. Caroline's journal, where she confided all of her true thoughts and feelings, was key to uncovering the reality of what was going on behind closed doors. Her Facebook also gave hints that things hadn't been right with Babis from the start. In 2016, soon after they began dating, she posted this. It roughly translates to, "You're the only flower I'll pick and let my whole hand be full of thorns." At that stage in her relationship, when she was just 15 years old, it seemed as though she was already aware that Babis could hurt her. On November 15, 2019, after they were married, Caroline wrote, "I am 18 years old, and I want to try to have a baby. I've not told Babis yet because today we argued." Less than a year into their marriage, Caroline felt the need to hide things from Babis and to tiptoe around his emotions. By December, things grew even more toxic. On New Year's Eve, she wrote, "I argued with Babis again. This time, a lot. I hit him, I cursed him, and he broke the door. The only thing I wanted was for him to ask if I was well when I woke up. I woke up feeling so weak and tired. I'm thinking about leaving, going to my sister. I do not know if I can continue with Babis. I love him so much that I can't leave him, even if this relationship is harming me. It was obvious to police reading that entry just how toxic their relationship was. As they reviewed Caroline's phone history, they got further confirmation. The night of Caroline's murder, she had been searching for hotels to stay at shortly before her phone activity stopped. Police suspected that Caroline and Babis had gotten into an argument and that Caroline was finally ready to leave him and stay at a hotel. Caroline disclosed to him that she wanted to separate and wanted her daughter to live with her, and at that point, Babis convinced her to stay home so he could initiate his plan. The camera was removed at 1:20 in the morning. For several hours afterwards, Babis staged the crime scene, breaking the window, opening drawers, and ransacking the home. At 4 a.m., he took a pillow and smothered his sleeping wife to death. This smothering likely took 5 minutes. 5 minutes of Caroline fighting for her life against the man who was supposed to love and protect her, all while her baby laid in the cot next to her. He had those 5 minutes to change his mind, to have an inkling of empathy. But he didn't. After killing Caroline, he hung their dog from the railing, then placed his 11-month-old daughter on top of her mother's dead body. But how exactly did the police know all this? There were 3 key factors. For starters, Caroline was wearing a smartwatch at the time of her murder. The watch indicated a rise in her heart rate, and then a full stop soon after 4 a.m. This didn't match with Babis's retelling of events where the robbers broke in soon after midnight. Then there was his phone activity. Despite claiming that he was tied up before his wife was killed, his phone GPS showed him moving around the house up until the point that he called the police. And finally, there was the lack of DNA evidence. The fact that the only DNA in the home belonged to Babis, Caroline, and Lydia completely contradicted the home invasion story. If 3 robbers entered, killed someone, and ransacked the home, it would be nearly impossible for them to avoid leaving DNA. When police confronted Babis with this information, he slowly began to realize that he wasn't there to identify a suspect in his wife's murder. He was the one and only suspect. After 8 hours of interrogation, he began to run out of lies. He finally confessed to killing Caroline Church. However, his reasoning only makes his confession more sick. Babis claims that Caroline was a terrible mother and that he feared his daughter would be ruined if she was raised by her. It should be noted that according to everyone who knew the couple, Caroline's whole world revolved around her little girl. He claimed that the only way to ensure that she wouldn't ruin his daughter was to kill her. He chose to kill his wife in her sleep because she was a black belt in kickboxing and he feared that she would take him down. When he asked why he killed the dog, he told officers that he did it because he didn't think anyone would believe that he could have killed his own puppy. News of his confession swept through Greece, and as he was whisked away to face trial, people spoke out against him.
Τέρας, Τίνος, θα σ' απίσει φυλακή ρε καριόλι. Τίνος, θα σ' απίσει φυλακή, αλήτη.
It didn't take long for Caroline to get justice. Babis was sentenced to life in prison for murder. For killing his dog, he was sentenced to an additional 11 years. He will not have the possibility for parole until 20 years into his sentence under Greek law. Caroline's parents, who are incredibly private people, managed to gain full custody of Lydia after a lengthy dispute with Babis's parents. They promptly moved to the Philippines, where Caroline's mother is from, and they intend to raise their granddaughter there with her cousins in Manila. In an interview, Caroline's father stated, "My only duty now is to look after her daughter Lydia, who is now without both a mother and a father, and ensure that she is brought up as her mother would have brought her up." Femicide is a shockingly common issue even in the modern day. This case sparked a much-needed discussion about domestic abuse and violence against women in Greece, where these topics are often swept under the rug or hidden. But some abusers go to extreme lengths to hide the hatred and violence inside them. Like this case, where a man faked a live stream while he murdered his pregnant girlfriend. If you want to see how police caught on to his lies, well, be sure to check out our video here.